Hello, everybody, and I want to thank the CACOR, the Canadian Club of Rome, for inviting me for this talk. And the topic is using AI to fight climate change, propaganda, fake news, and election tampering. So a lot of these things are prescient in people's minds. I guess one question to ask yourself is, what is the goal of AI? What do we want AI to do? How do we want it to help humanity? And often, the computer scientists give the idea, the goal is something they call often AGI, or artificial general intelligence. It's like basically maybe having a room of 1,000 Einsteins on your smartphone or desktop to assist you in whatever you want it to do. So happy Chinese New Year. And they've given us a couple gifts just a few days ago. DeepSeek, the company DeepSeek, gifted us a new AI, which is superior basically to most of the other AIs that exist. And of course, the Chinese have also given us lots of clean energy, and they produce 90% of the solar panels, the solar cells, actually the wafers that go into solar photovoltaic, among other things. So inspired by Nick Breeze, a good friend of mine who wrote the book Cop Out about climate cops, including, and I was just there, chatting with him in Baku, Azerbaijan at that COP. And it was, it's always fascinating talking to him. And I'll just give you a little story at the beginning. Just yesterday, I filmed a video with Meta Spencer, who just joined, and we interviewed Nick Breeze about his book. And then lo and behold, that was yesterday. I wake up this morning and I have a bunch of emails from her. There's a 1,000-word summary of everything we talked about in the video, which went on for about a 90-minute talk. So how did she do all this? Did she stay up all night? No, she just used an AI. She used software to get the transcript, then asked ChatGPT-4, please write a 1,000-word summary on what was talked about. And it did a very good job of doing that, which was, in my inbox this morning. So this talk is a little bit Gonzo style. Gonzo style is a journalist style where the actual journalist is in, and it's not, you try to be objective, but there's some subjective parts, and it's supposed to be funny and humorous and witty and all that. So I'll do my best. So looking at sort of the background of AI. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So in the late 1990s, I worked for ATI Technologies in Markham. ATI Technologies, Canadian company, built computer graphics chips and the cards which slotted into your PCs, the personal computer. So there was a huge race at that time to increase speed, memory, capacity, and cost of these devices. The driving factor in the market was computer gamers, those teenagers living in the basement wanting faster and faster software to render better and better games, like the graphics on larger screens, higher pixel counts, resolution. And also at that time, there was a stock frenzy. So, ATI at times seemed more like a stock trading room of the Toronto Stock Exchange, because everybody was buying and selling and people were making thousands upon thousands of dollars per day. It was a frenzy. ATI was in the lead, I think, in graphics cards at that time. Maybe the stock frenzy knocked them off the lead. NVIDIA, a very small company that you may have heard of, was a close second to ATI at that time. And then a disruption came along that you only really see in the rearview mirror. So NVIDIA came out with a graphics processing unit, a GPU, called GeForce. And what made it different from all the predecessors was there was a breakthrough in speed, because it had an onboard processor that was dedicated to rendering the video for large screens for the gamers. So it didn't have to ask the CPU for permission to do things. It did things independently, pretty much on its own. Render graphics, and it did it. So it took a lot of the burden off the central processing units of our personal computers, AMD or Intel. And so it was basically a revolution in graphics. Now, the GPUs is evolved over time, of course, from those days, but it's the heart basically to get an AI, people are trying to build hardware which will operate like the human brain. So the brain has neurons, the neurons are connected to many other neurons, and you get this neural network. Well, this is what we're trying to do. That's basically the hardware of today's AIs. And the GPUs made by NVIDIA are the nodes, if you like, or the neurons of this brain. Okay, so that's part A of my story. So let's get to part B. I left JDS, I left ATI, and I moved to Ottawa in 2000 to work for JDS Uniphase. I also got married for the second time, which is part of the reason I moved to Ottawa. I was a product line manager for optical switches. So it was a perfect fit for my background in laser physics. I'd also done optics research previously at Rockwell International back in the late 80s. So fiber optic communications was all the rage in Ottawa. Of course, we had Nortel, giant. We had JDS was huge. The week I was hired at JDS, the initiation was a room full of 200 people. There were 200 people hired that week. I mean, things were explosive then. Why? Because we wanted to get better speed for fiber optic communication systems. So before we had electronic devices collected electronically to run these large networks, then it went to optical fiber, optics being my background. So we had these different, the idea was that there were these switches or nodes, if you like, similar to the GPUs, and these nodes were all connected by optical fiber. And what you had to do is the nodes would generate the signal and modulate, put the information on the laser signal, which went through the fiber. Started with a few wavelengths and it became multiplex, many different wavelengths, each one a different channel on the fiber. Going to the next electronic node, you'd have to convert light signal to electrical signal, do what you wanted with it, and then shunt it forward by going back to light and going along the next branch of the fiber, say to a different city. So the idea was all optical switching. If you could just pull out the wavelengths that you needed the information from in a city and just pass the other ones right through the node at the speed of light, then you could greatly increase the fiber optic carrying capacity. So this was huge. Of course, the optics is very important also for what we're seeing now in quantum computing, which is sort of a big threat to cyber currencies. So basically, the optical fiber are like the connections between the nodes or the neurons. So basically, that's part two, the two components. Now, so part C is combining parts A and B. So NVIDIA over time had better and better GPUs, right? Better being faster, could deal with more wavelengths, et cetera, more advanced. Machine learning increased in complexity and sophistication. And all of this led us to do a better simulation of the human brain. And that's the whole thing. So again, the NVIDIA GPUs are the neurons and the fiber optics are the connections. Actually, neural networks started with electrical connections. So they're only moving to fiber optic and light connections, and you can't beat communication than that by light because things are moving at the speed of light, right? So basically, in the human brain, one neuron connects to on average, about 7,000 other neurons, and as many as 15,000 in some very dense parts of the human brain. Well, the sort of state-of-the-art GPUs and switches, they can connect to about 256 nodes, not 7,000, not 1,000 or 100. It's about 250 nodes. This is the NVIDIA device, one of their big switching devices. They have an optical device, and we're going to move to optical with more advanced, more expensive hardware for neural networks. So basically, that's all it is. It's quite simple. I mean, you've got the GPU, graphical processing unit. It's no longer a graphical processing unit. It's a neuron of a warehouse full of them, and they're all connected to as many others as possible by these fiber optic cables in the more advanced systems. So all the idea, the whole view is to get a better AI system, to get that AGI, or artificial general intelligence, human capacity. We just need a bigger room, more GPUs, faster connections, and so on. So that was the idea. And then we scrape the web, we get all the information off the web, and feed it all in, and then you have your basic system, and you can ask it questions and do whatever you want. So how do you advance the capacity or capability of the AI? Well, you can get better, faster GPUs. You can get more of them. You can scale up. You can get better optical switching. You can get better fiber links, like lower loss in the fiber, so more pure optical fiber. You could use more wavelengths going through the fiber, so higher multiplexing, more channels, more connections. You can better train the thing. You can use better software, and you basically put billions of dollars in it, and that's what industry has done. That's what the West has done. So we're seeing, whether we like it or not, there's a proliferation of AI helpers. So Microsoft has their AI. Twitter/X has Grob, they call it. OpenAI has ChatGPT-4. I use Perplexity.ai quite a bit. There's about 100 different versions or so. And some of them you have to pay for. And if you pay, you get up-to-date data. And the free versions are maybe just data up to, say, a year or two old. Now, we don't have any choice, or we have very little agency as individuals to stay away from this stuff. Unless we're unless we're Amish, because Amish, basically they reject a lot of technologies that they think will make them less social, like cars. They accept toasters, fridges, microwaves, because that simplifies their life. So they select technologies, but we generally don't do that, right, as our society. So what happened a week ago? You may notice that your stock price is cratered if you have any tech stocks. NVIDIA was down over 15%. On Monday, what happened is, on the weekend, people realized that this new Chinese technology company called DeepSeek had a new AI, which was better than all their AIs. So happy Chinese New Year again. So this Chinese startup called DeepSeek, it was only founded in 2023. So that's like almost last year. Just actually it's a year before. Well, it's 2023, so it's a year and a half maybe ago. I have a vision of like a bunch of kids in a garage disrupting the disruptors. Apparently they only used 5.6 million to do their work, but that number is controversial. And they basically, there's huge, very severe export restrictions on hardware for AI, like on the GPUs and on other technologies, switching technologies. Biden put these in, and the idea was to keep China behind in AI. So China's using old GPUs, nothing close to the most fastest and most modern. They're slow, they're crappy, they're probably using electrical connections, but they came up with a better AI. So how did they do this? Well, they were smarter with the software. I mean, that's the only thing that the algorithms and the software. And also the thing is, it's all free and it's open source. And what's really disruptive is you can see the thought patterns of the AI as it's working. You can see the algorithms churning away and the process, and there's huge demand on it. I tried to download it several times, both the app and on my computer, and they had to restrict it to just Chinese downloading in China first, because there was just huge demand driven by all of the world news and by it taking $1 trillion off the huge Western AI companies. So basically, what can we use the AI for? It's always a double-edged sword. So I'd like to give the example of Meta Spencer. I already mentioned that we interviewed Nick Breeze, and within a day, she sends me this amazing summary of what we talked about for 90 minutes in a 1,000-word summary generated by the ChatGPT AI, which she has a subscription to. And there's also the bad points of all this technology. I mean, Meta was, she can correct me in the questions if she wants, but as I understand it, she was Zoom bombed. she basically recorded, she's working with the Project to Save the World. She's very concerned about climate change and about getting people together. She was born in 1931. Sorry to give your age, Meta, but she's 93, 94 years old. And she does all of this work with AI assistance. So she does the Zooms and then it goes on to Substack and YouTube. But when she did it live feed, some pranksters Zoom bombed her and showed their genitals. So YouTube basically shut her down for 2 months. Well, not to be deterred, she contacted some friends at the CBC, was on the news talking about how YouTube wouldn't respond to her videos and restate her channel. And lo and behold, YouTube restated her, they opened her channel again. So the technology is changing all of the time. It's getting extremely fast, and it's becoming very difficult to tell the difference between human writing and AI writing. And I guess one of the next steps is to have conversational AI. So you talk to an AI, I mean, it's there, but it's not so good. And you can't distinguish it from a person. It has emotions, it knows how you're feeling. Okay, so how do we use AI for climate to address the climate issue? So basically, obviously, there's obvious physical things that we can do to use AI. So we can use AI to get better climate models to figure out, how much temperature is going to rise over time. AI is already being used to improve weather prediction models, which are basically when you run weather prediction models longer term, you get climate model predictions. We're using AI to come up with new techniques to do things better, to lower carbon footprints, for example. AI, people are starting to use AI to figure out ways to cool the planet. And this is like solar radiation management methods. People are using AI to look for ways to capture carbon. For example, using AI to look at the different molecular structures and say, can we make this material that can capture carbon? So the physical things are pretty obvious as to how we could use AI, but the social science things are, I think, just as important or maybe even more important. So imagine using an AI like DeepSeek, which just came out and it's free to the world. Imagine the Canadian government saying, we need to protect our elections. We need to protect our democracy. We're already seeing attacks on our democracy via propaganda, fake news, messages. I was on Twitter the other day and I saw Mark Carney in blackface. Okay, this never happened, but the AI just generated it. So we can use AI to act as a filter and either flag propaganda and fake news and say it is such, or just to eliminate it completely from such feeds. I mean, Twitter X, I used all the time. I've used it for years. It's a cesspool, the comments. Facebook it's better, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. TikTok closed down and reopened. Why did it reopen? Because a billionaire in the US will buy it. So basically what we're doing is we're getting a complete media control capture of social media by the digital tech bros. And this is very concerning. At least I'm concerned about it. We're gaining, like I said, advances in quantum computing, which will threaten cryptocurrencies, which is all the rage, and people are making huge amounts of money on it. Now, you have to be careful. Let me talk a little bit about censorship, because if you go to, I haven't had the Chinese DeepSeek yet on my system because I can't get it. But if you ask it about Tiananmen Square or Taiwan, it says, I don't want to talk about those things. Let's talk about something else. Okay, so it doesn't give you false information and say it never happened or whatever. It just says it doesn't want to talk about it. So if you ask ChatGPT-4, I haven't tried it, but ask ChatGPT about January 6th, what happened on January 6th, or ask it about issues there. If there's no censorship there now, then I'm sure there will come on, it'll come on soon. So this is a new world that we're in. So how are we going to deal with it? Well, I read, let me just show you this. I've got the Atlantic here. This is February. The title is The Antisocial Century by Derek Thompson. Now, I agree with a lot in the article. Meta disputed some of it, but one very interesting thing is think of your own connections with people and how you use social media and digital media networks. So think of a circle with concentric rings. The core of the circle is personal. It's your friends, your family, your children, your grandchildren. You know, you see pictures of babies on Facebook or whatever. We all love that part. That's a very positive part of social media. Expand the circle and get the huge broad circle, and which is the world. And we tend to go in tribes with like-minded people. We tend to go on sites, and the term is echo chambers, and you only hear things that support you, and you block people that disagree, etc. So that's the wide view. Well, what's between those two things? Between those two things is a concentric circle called community. And community is where democracy happens. So this community used to be work friends. You know, you go into work 5 days a week and you chat with your friends and you go out for beer or whatever and you make connections, human connections, one-on-one, in real. You know, or you go to the coffee shop and you have your friends there. You exchange ideas. You can disagree, but you learn how to deal with disagreeing. And that's a very important part of democracy. And social cues are important. So if I was sitting in a room with all of you talking, we'd be making eye contact. You'd see my body language. I would see yours. You know, there's so much that's communicated non-verbally, and we miss all that on Zoom. Now, why is community so important? Well, I think democracy is important. You know, in order to have empathy for other people, in order to have tolerance for other people, we need community, person-to-person contact. And we evolved to get these cues and things throughout human history for the simple reason it prevented us from killing each other, right? It really did. So we're losing this person-to-person thing, and as a result, you know, the hate is building, and the rhetoric is building, and society appears to be sort of collapsing. You know, not just from climate, but from all these other things. It just seems like the world is upside down. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Canadian elections. You know, we know that far right in other countries is going to have a big influence on us, on young people, on anybody on social media, which is most of the world. So social media it can be weaponized against democracy. So what are we going to do about it? I've recommended, I say that we need an AI like DeepSeek or something else to get rid of propaganda. So let's look at Canada. Let's pretend that we're playing the game of Risk. Okay, so you know, one person, one country I'll take North America. I'm going to take Canada. I'm in the US. I'm going to take Canada. I'm going to take Greenland. I'm going to take Panama. I want all of North America, and I'll give Russia, the Ukraine, Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, the Baltic states, and we'll give China Taiwan, right? I mean, this is what seems to be happening, like game theory wise, right? So so, you know, how would you get Canada? How would you get Canada? Well, Canada, obviously, I don't need to spell it out, but Canada is under threat. And what you do is you go for the weak points. And I would say from a US perspective or any other country, Canada's weak points are obviously Quebec and Alberta, right? Those provinces, like what you could tell Quebec, hey, join the US dollars at par. You know, we'll give you complete autonomy to do what you want. It's almost like you're an independent country. You've heard that before, a country within Canada. And Alberta has, of course, the oil, and you use economic incentives. Like Greenland's got 57,000 people. How does Trump get Greenland? Well, he could offer them 100,000 US to every person there. Not enough? 200,000. Okay, let's go to $1 million. We'll give every person in Greenland $1 million US. Do you think they're going to vote to be part of the US, or do you think they're going to vote to stay part of Denmark, right? So those are questions that I have. Okay, so I played Duplicate Bridge a couple days ago. My favorite suit is no Trump. Okay. And I don't need to, I don't need to say why. Now, in this game, it's interesting because if you can't follow suit, what do? You trump and win the trick, right? I think we should change that name in Canada to you take a trick. And the standard bidding method in duplicate bridge is standard American. Let's call it standard Canadian. It's just pointing out that our interrelationship with the U.S. is in everything, right? Inflation, for example. Let's talk, what's going on. Like all of these things have implications on people. It's not just climate, democracy, propaganda, all these other things. Let's look at people that own a place in Florida, for example. So there's an article about some snowbirds. They bought a place, a condo on a Florida beach, and in 2011 they paid 1,600 US a year to insure the place. No storms or accidents or anything, no claims against insurance were made from 2011 to now on this particular beach. And now they pay 16,000 US a year for insurance. You want to buy some eggs? Well, the Canadian conversion is like about $1 an egg. A carton of 18 eggs is like 18 bucks. Many places are getting insurance canceled. So what do? Well, you sell your place and come back. So lots of people are doing that. The biggest driver is the Canadian dollar. We're testing levels about 69 cents. And I've seen some reports that with tariffs, we're going to go to 68 and even lower. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of noise out there. It's hard to keep it all together. There's new stuff happening every single day. And one of the problems is it seems that our side is too nice. The other side is ruthless. AI can we can help try to get AI to preserve what we have if we use it properly. So let me talk about the foreign interference inquiry just yesterday. The Quebec Court of Appeal Justice Marie-Josée Hague, she says, and I quote, "It is no exaggeration to say that at this juncture, information manipulation, whether foreign or not, poses the single biggest risk to our democracy. It is an existential threat." That's what she wrote. And guess what? My puppy dog just came to visit me. So he's been out walking all day. He's okay. He's a bit subdued. I thought he was going to jump up on me and knock the camera over. But anyway, it's perfect timing because it's about half an hour, and I think the question period will probably be just as interesting or even more interesting than what I've had to say and introduce. So yeah, I guess I think we're going to be pretty close to this artificial general intelligence very soon. If you combine the smarts of the software and algorithms of the Chinese, who can make a better AI with their second, third generation GPUs and hardware, and they can do it at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the power consumption because the scale is much lower. Then if those are used with the top of the line chips in the largest systems now, I think we're probably, if we combine those things, I think we're basically a human intelligence for AI. Okay, so anyway, thanks for putting up with me and my wit and humor. Hopefully it wasn't too far off the track, but it's gonzo style, which Nick used in his book. I highly recommend it. If you want to know how the cops work, the climate conferences work, what they're doing, then his book is called Cop Out is the thing to do. So anyway, yeah, so let's have questions, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Paul. I'm going to ask the first question, and Richard Vandriax is on deck. So you were, I sensed quite positive about the potential for AI to help us. And I'm wondering whether you think that there's any possibility of things perhaps going a little bit differently and us ending up with the Terminator.
Yes, it's always a double-edged sword, for sure, because also the idea of the AI and censorship, right? The AI to filter out propaganda. As Meta said yesterday, and I highly recommend you listen to that interview with Nick Breeze at Just Go to Save the World. She said that, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, right? So if you're going to censor something, if you disagree with what's being censored, you might be okay with that censorship, right? So who's in charge? Who's in control? See, the other thing is that I guess the question, like, have you used AI yourself is a question. And if you haven't, just go on your phone or computer and type perplexity.ai and start asking it some questions. It's free. So the question I have is, if you ask an AI questions, the information it provides you is actually more information that goes out on the web. So that very act of doing that can actually change the response that somebody else asking it gets. Probably not right away. It's an infinitesimally small iteration. But if you ask it the same question in a week, same question in a month, and if you ask the same question to all of the different AIs, you're going to get slightly different responses. So those studies, I think, will be very important to see what's happening now. Yeah, AI. I mean, sure. Imagine, the present U.S. government using AI to unleash things against not just Americans but against the world. It becomes a very dystopian situation very quickly. So the Chinese, I think it's important that countries around the world, develop their AIs, like the information to do it becomes shared, I guess. But then if it gets in the wrong hands, it could be very dangerous. And we're like the Terminator. We don't know. I mean, we like it's really hard to predict the future, right? There's so many different variables and things that it could go either way. What I'm saying is we have a Canadian election coming up where our election is going to be influenced by people on social media. They're all going to be voting, right? So I think, what are we going to do about it? Like, can we do anything about it? I mean, we're talking about a very compressed time frame. Now we have an Ontario election coming up as well. But we're seeing a turn away from democracy around the world. We're seeing a turn to the far right. We're getting open support by certain billionaires for far right parties in, say, Germany and other places. We're seeing very disturbing things. So what can we do about it in this country? I mean, this is very important. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to answer. It could go either way. It depends on, depends on my mood. If I wake up and I'm really sort of optimistic, I say, oh yeah, AI is going to help us. The next day, bad day, bad mood. You don't kick the dog, just say the world's going to end, Terminator, climate's going to destroy us all. We're not going to be able to eat in 10 years. I mean, look at the poor people in Florida, in Florida with hurricanes. Look at the poor people in Spain with the flooding, in LA. I know many people. Here's the thing for you. Okay, let's say you're a diligent technical guy. You're a research guy or girl, woman, whatever. You're a researcher. You research climate change. You live in Altadena or whatever that place.
Altadena, yeah.
And you take your bike to Pasadena, you go to JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they do all the moon probes and stuff. They do a lot of climate stuff. There's a lot of NOAA stuff there. You go and you work on climate and you see it getting worse and worse. And then one day your whole neighborhood gets burned down. And then the insurance companies actually, they see the fire coming and they're canceling some houses that are in the path of the fire. I've heard this. It's true. I have no idea. But we're hearing a lot of BS, a lot of noise, and a lot of people are being affected. I say we're all in the climate casino.
Yeah.
If you get bad luck, you lose your house. Your house is submerged, flooded, washed away, whatever. What about the community in the Appalachian Mountains? People moved there because they thought it was climate safe, right? Nice climate, higher elevation, bit cooler, not going to have heat waves. And then you get Helene dumping tons of water and the river floods and washes out half the town. So what do you do? Live in a mobile home and just move away from the disasters, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, so I think that's a way of looking at the world that might have applied 50 years ago, where disasters were localized. And people haven't yet gotten their heads around the fact that that's not the world in which we live now. We are going to be looking at continental scale disasters where it's not possible to respond, it's not possible to be resilient. Most people are going to die when they experience it, but that's a whole other matter. Okay, I want to turn this over to Richard van der Yacht, but I've got Art on deck.
Okay, thanks. Good talk, Paul. And there's lots of interesting things happening in this area, and I think you've hit it on the nose. Just yesterday, I read an article in Science magazine that they now have self-replicating computers. I'm just wondering, this is just another aspect of, the AI sort of beginning to have a power that was not before. This is getting outside of the guardrails, and it's a bit scary. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's the pace that is so fast, right? Like I've often said years ago. I mean, it's really funny because I never really. I mean, I worked on computer graphics cards, right, for PCs. I worked on fiber optics, optical switching. I never really thought that I was working on any components of AI, but these are all at the core of the AI hardware now. So the pace of change, I often thought with AI that it may take an awful long time, decades, to get an AI as smart as Forrest Gump. Okay. And I thought once we've accomplished that, then the very next year we'll have an Einstein AI. The rate of growth is just so phenomenal. So the Chinese breakthrough. And by the way, try to download that. I don't know if you'll be able to at the moment, but they're going to clear up the backlog. It's just huge numbers of people around the world are trying this new deep seek, and it's using second or third gen. It's using old chips. It's using old technology for the hardware because there's severe export restrictions, or maybe China's smuggled stuff in. I don't know, but it doesn't sound like it. And they've created this thing for a fraction of the cost, maybe a 50th of the cost of like the companies like Nvidia. The big companies, so once and it's open source, so the technologies will eventually appear in like the Western AI companies. So the company most at risk, I would say, is the company OpenAI, because that's an AI company. Also, I think these cryptocurrencies and bitcoins, which the U.S. administration is gung ho on right now, those will be threatened by advances in the optical switching and optical methods. So if we do get a quantum computer, it'll be able to go through all the combinations, and you can't have a cryptocurrency. It'll just hack in. So it makes it, we'll go back to gold in vaults. I mean, I'm reading Mark Carney's book called Value, and then there's a in brackets S, so value and values. He wrote it in 2021. Of course, he talks about it's really funny, the part I just read, because it's about the Bank of England and the gold in their vault. So we spend all of this money to take the gold out of the ground, right? And we ship it across the oceans and we put it in the vault, and it sits in an underground vault in the Bank of England. Like, what's the point of gold? I mean, it's because humans put value on it. So, I mean, if you want to look at the positives of what's happening south of us, is that people maybe will look for stability and look for I mean, who better to run a country than a central banker for two central banks? And that's just but I don't want to get into politics. It's hard not to, right? Because a lot of it is, but yeah, things are just happening so quickly. So I could see the Chinese companies. This company didn't exist in 2022. The company that has this technology that's caused Wall Street to drop, or NASDAQ to drop $1 trillion plus. The company wasn't even around a couple of years ago. So they have this technology which is disrupting the disruptors, as I said. And if you use their technology, obviously their algorithms and their software, and you used it in one of the best, most modern rooms full of top of the line GPUs in the US, all connected by fiber optic cable with the latest switches, optical switches, and then ran that, I mean, I'd say we'd probably have human intelligence from there. So we're very, very close.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So I got Peter McKinnon on deck and going over to Art Hunter now.
Yeah, I guess I was first introduced to artificial intelligence back in the days. It was called a digital filter and Kalman filters, whereby you could read in a bunch of data. In fact, I was using it in orbit determination with Telesat Canada, whereby you're reading azimuth, elevation, and range of the satellite, and converting that into the 6 dimensions of that are required to locate a body in a 2-body environment in space and to determine the orbit. And that was, of course, learning, because every 10 seconds you're getting new information, you're processing that and making the prediction of where you were 10 seconds ago even better than you could extrapolate and say the error was only so big, etc. But that was my early introduction to the learning side of AI, and of course the output side was those big sheets of computer paper we used to get from the mainframes, and so they were numbers and whatever you could do. Now, of course, things have changed, where the input and the output is the large language module, or it could be sensors, it could be videos, it could be voice. There's many things as well as text, and I read some material now, and I see that these large language modules are appealing to 300 languages. I didn't even know there were 300 languages on the planet. And of course, that's just the input-output side. Then on the learning side, it's off scraping the internet with, all these languages. And of course, that takes an awful lot of processing power to and web crawlers and things to gather all that information and process it. And I mean, and I understand everything you said about, just processing both the IO as well as the learning side is very hardware driven and lots of innovation going into it. One of the things I do want to ask is, because there is scraping, clearly it's picking up misinformation, propaganda, and this is diluting. And there is this thing which I call intellectual laziness, because as these tools become built into your word processings and your analysis of what's happening on talks like this, it generates intellectual laziness, which says, I quite accept what's there. I mean, you just talked about your Meta Spencer.
It's definitely it's changing our brain.
Yeah.
Okay, what we're doing is changing our brain, our thought patterns quickly. Like when you have I mean we learn more if we have to struggle a bit. Remember trying to learn how to solve those math equations, or how to write an essay and get the wording just right and stuff. If you don't have those struggles, you don't have the same learning for sure. There's no question learning is down. It's already like our society is all already changed immensely after COVID, right? I mean, COVID put us all in isolation for a while. And now a lot of people think they prefer isolation, right? There's huge resistance to going back to work because people don't know what's better for them, according to many of the leading psychologists now. People think they know what's good for them, but they don't. They're misled. So I'll give you an example. Think of the number of times, how many movies have you been to in the last year in a theater? Okay, the average American goes to 3 movies a year in a theater, and they watch about 19 hours of video of movies on their screens in a week, which is 8 full-length movies times 50 weeks is about 400 movies a year they'll watch, and 3 are in a movie theater. Well, how do we expect a movie theater to stay open? The jobs of the concessionists, it's usually an anchor site in a big mall or something. How do we expect that mall to stay open? Like we're seeing this in Ottawa with the downtown core, eventually it turns over to crime. Our whole society changes. We think that we need our me time. They did a study. There's like I say, get the February issue and read it, and then it's probably worth a talk just talking about what's on there because people will disagree. Meta says she couldn't do all of her work without being on the screen and using the algorithm and stuff, and she feels quite very happy. I said to her, what about a teenager who can't even go out with their friends because everybody wants to just connect by Zoom and stay at home? I mean, we've turned into, if you look at the stats on the number of hours we spend at home, they've skyrocketed. On the number of personal face-to-face interactions with another human being in a week, the number of hours, they've plummeted, right? Our society is, we're not as, we don't have the same empathy for our neighbor. I mean, when did you invite your neighbors over for dinner last? When did you go to the community center, right? Like you have to say, well, I need to see people and go and do these things. But they did a study on the daily commute on a train into New York. And they took a wide swath of people of different ages, and they said to them, we're doing a study here. And people, got paid, and I guess they got paid, or I don't know, but I don't know all the details. But basically, the people were told to be an introvert for a week. Don't talk to anybody. Don't acknowledge they're there. Just read, be on your phone. You're just there in your own world. Everybody's around you. You're totally ignoring them. And then they asked questions that determined how they felt at the end of the week. Then they did the opposite. They said, you talk to everybody. Don't turn your phone on. Talk to your fellow passengers. Talk about the weather at the beginning, and then talk about the football game or whatever, and do this for a week. And people were hesitant to do that. There was resistance to them doing that. And at the end of the week, they felt way, way better. They felt energized. They felt, right? People were surprised at how good they felt by being forced into being a little bit of extrovert. So I'm saying that these sort of things, like our brain changes with every conversation we have, with everything we do, with every group, and we're having less and less community interaction. We're having more and more screens, and because we're having less and less community, we're fighting evolution. Humans evolved to be social creatures and to pick up on cues and so on, facial movements, body language with other human beings. There's a good reason for that. It's so that we wouldn't kill each other. It wasn't so long ago that if you or I met on the street, we'd try to kill each other, right? We've evolved from that. But what I'm saying is we're starting to evolve away from that, and we're getting to be a very harsh and intolerant and like society that's different. With all of the associated problems with it.
Yeah, and I guess I'm really addressing intellectual laziness, or can it be stimulating? And I dare say right now I'm looking at both sides of the coin, and
Yeah.
uncertain. I think it depends more on the individual than it
Yes.
is on blanket statement that is applicable to all mankind.
Yeah. I mean, people need, this is just looking at averages across the population, and talking and this study looking at psychologists and their views and the latest philosophies and so on. So individuals, I mean, some people really get energized by spending time alone. Some people, the connections with other people on a Zoom call or on texting, is very satisfying to them. They prefer it. But it got to the point where people had this free time. They got to work from home for COVID, and now they don't want to lose that. I mean, whatever things that we gain from something happening, we want to hold on to and keep. Right. So I don't understand this aversion to back to work. You have to go back and talk to people in person.
Okay.
Right?
Let's move on. And
what's so bad about that?
Yeah, we'll turn it over to Peter.
Like, we could talk about our CACOR group, right? We could talk about the meetings and what we derive from them. And I've been pushing you guys for ages. Do a in-person meeting, even if it's only a couple times a year. Because there's so much to gain. The group has so much to gain from doing that. And people, oh no, we like the Zooms every week. And
I just want to point out you've actually missed the last two. But anyway, Ted Manning is on deck, and I'm going to Peter McKinnon now.
Thanks, Dave. And Paul, thanks very much for your presentation. I noted that, of course, you used the term AI in very general terms. So I just wanted to point out to the folks listening that what you were really talking about was natural language processing, just a narrow part of AI, and that AI is really concerned with all of our senses. You see machine vision and tactile sensing in robots, for example. Those are also AI related stuff. So I just want to make that comment. I do have a question though, Paul, and you didn't address it in any direct way. And that is, can you comment at all in any use of AI with respect to any of the global climate models currently being used as a sort of the benchmarks?
Yeah, so there's a paper came out, peer-reviewed paper recently, talking about it uses AI to try to predict when we'll lose the Arctic sea ice in the summer. Okay, so it looks at all of the data, the observation in the past, and it tries to say, okay, we're likely to lose Arctic sea ice. And you can look at predictions in other peer-reviewed papers, and some people say it's 10 years off. Other papers, they usually give a range with probabilities. Some say it could be within 3 years to 20 years, and it's all across the map. So the AI is another data point on that, right? like the thing is we don't know, like, what is it basing it on? What are the algorithms? It's like another peer-reviewed paper. Is it going to be better than any of the other predictions? I don't think anything can know for sure. There's a lot of conditions, because we could have a very warm summer, which slaughters a lot of the ice, and then the winter could also be super warm record, and then the ice doesn't grow back enough, and then we could have an early spring thaw, and if all those things coincide, we have no ice in the summer at the end, by September of the following year, right? So all of these things would have to be in place. Also, if there's lots of fires in the boreal forest, then, and some of that ash goes up into the Arctic, it could block sunlight and it can be cooler, and then that can keep things there, right? There's all of these different factors that even an AI, the best AI, is just going to have an opinion. Right? Because we try to predict things that are unpredictable. There's always going to be a level of uncertainty. So I think the AI is being used by a lot of the main groups that do climate models, just to try to incorporate it. So they take their existing model and then they use the AI and say, well, what do you think? They feed in the information from all the models they've already done and then ask it to generate its own models. Right. So people are doing that. It's used a lot in weather forecasting for sure. Right. And some of the meteorologists are saying that, it seems to be much better at most things. It's also, you know, just a few years ago, people were saying, well, there's a lot of nonsense from AI. It's hallucinating. It's giving us garbage, right? And those things are being tweaked to find out why. You know, they say never check, never trust it for sure. Just check. And, you know, but I mean, now it's generating images that it's very difficult to tell. Is this a real image or is this a generated image? It can generate videos, completely fantasy videos. It's used in Hollywood a lot, in the movie industry, I know. They're actually using it to, you know, some actors that died years ago could be in a movie because the AI can get their voice and get their mannerisms and get their movements, and it's not like how are we going to know what to believe? You know, with what you see is the problem, right?
Absolutely. That's why, in fact, Hollywood went on strike, as you may recall, a couple of summers ago.
Yeah,
That was one
yeah,
of the reasons they were sensitive as a union to this technology actually affecting highly paid professionals.
yeah. And what about, you know, authors writing books? I mean,
Yes.
you can generate a book a week. You know,
Well, in
just pick a
fact, it was a
topic and
documented. This was, I believe, in Wired magazine, so it was published. There was a documented case about a year and a half ago of a woman who's a U.S. Author of sort of, I guess, pulp fiction books, and there was a book for sale that was written by her in her style on Amazon, and she had nothing to do with it. It was generated by AI.
right.
So somebody was creating a new kind of crime,
Yeah,
imitating an author like we've had as artists. We've had the you know the impress people who've made replicas of masters.
yeah, yeah.
Now
So
we're
what
getting people who
happens?
are making copies of style of the author because the
Right.
AI knows it can learn about the style.
Right. So what happens as a result of this is that the body of writing, the number of books, the number of publications proliferates, accelerates, and there's no way a human can read more than any small fraction of this, right? And the real stuff is going to be intermingled with all the other stuff, and how are you going to tell which is which? So we're creating a very, you know, this is 2025, but it feels like 1984, you know, that book or some, you know,
Yes.
yeah, like it's really, these are all very important questions, right? It's definitely changing our society completely. I mean, you know, I'm very concerned. I mean, I was at a coffee shop just before this. Okay, there were four elderly ladies and in the neighborhood, and they were talking about their bridge game. So I suggested the changes to. I said no, Trump's good, but call it standard Canadian and call it taking tricks, not trumping. You know, they laughed. I invited them to the talk. They're going to watch the video. They don't know about CACOR. You know, they're going to hear about CACOR. I'm doing marketing for CACOR. You know, I'm getting people that might want to join. But anyway, my point is it was just a conversation, right? Like I can see body language, right? I mean, there's no way you can replicate body language and signals on a Zoom call. You just can't, because we're all on these little boxes and I'm talking, and if I'm looking at all the boxes to try to see some body language, I mean, like we're in a different world by doing all these things. Are we choosing to do all these things, or are we just doing them because they're convenient to us? Right? Because it's the path of least resistance. I mean, we have to start acting more like um, the Amish. No, we don't want cars. We don't want computers, but toasters and microwaves and refrigerators are good because they simplify our life, right? But I mean, we're living in a world where the technology is just advancing and we're only seeing things in the rearview mirror. Was this a good thing, a bad thing, whatever?
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. The writer to whom you were trying to make reference was commonly known as George Orwell.
George Orwell, yes.
That's actually not his real name. The guy's
Okay,
name was Eric Blair, but he wrote under a pseudonym. So
right.
just like my
Okay,
sci-fi model,
yeah.
sci-fi novels. Okay, so I want to go to Ted in a moment, and Claude, you're on deck.
You can actually make signatures. You can actually say things. You can develop a totally new language should you really wish to communicate even over Zoom. That said, yes, I agree completely, Paul, that the notion of getting people really together to argue out real things in real time is still very attractive. And in fact, I do that a lot for a living, so, often in strange countries. The second point is in 1984, I was working in what wasn't called AI at the time at IASA, putting together spatial futures work, trying to extrapolate different visions of climate change regarding how it would affect the economy and the society, and using a variety of multispectral images to do visual integrations. Hell of a lot more than I could do in my mind. But at the time, we had fairly large computers available to us. And it was really extrapolating the ideas that were available to us. So things, yes, they have changed. Like today, I used the results of AI because we're translating a couple of our books into. In fact, I've been jointly writing a book in Spanish and English with people, and the translation. One of the products of AI is the translation engine is so good that I virtually don't have to even do much editing. So it is becoming, there are tools that are really beneficial to us. And many of these narrow AI things are really becoming very useful. The other side, though, and I just put on the note, we had a think tank conference in New York in November on the whole idea of establishing guardrails for AI, jointly with a number of UN agencies, an American outfit, and the Club of Rome. And the idea really is, it's new because the amount of work that has been on the establishment of guardrails has not been terribly fruitful yet. Lots of ideas, very few of them likely to be operational. And the big AI, again, most of the work seems to be focusing primarily on identifying fakes. And certainly there's an awful lot of financial and social concern associated with that. And in fact, in last month in Korea, they had several previous heads of UN agencies going together, brought together specifically to look at establishing an international standard for guardrails for AI. And I haven't seen the results of that yet, but they are sufficiently concerned. So my question to you then is it possible, and what can we then do to limit the negative outcomes? Lots of us are working on positive ones, but how about handling the negative spillover?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think we need to give international organizations like the UN a lot more power than they have. I mean, they can recommend things, but they don't hold weight. Like they can't enforce things. It's just mostly voluntary, whether it be for climate or addressing poverty, food shortage. I think these organizations are extremely important and need to be given more power. And I think there needs to be, I mean, I think part of the whole problem with society is that it's the inequality. What do we really want billionaires in our society, right? Because these billionaires, we're going to have the first trillionaire probably soon, and if some of these people are pulling the strings behind the AIs, we're into a very dystopian type situation, and I don't know. I mean, think of yourself. Okay, most of us here are okay money-wise. We can spend time on this program and not be working, digging ditches or shoveling snow or whatever. We're doing okay. Think of us if we suddenly, doubled the amount of money we had and then doubled the gain and tripled. Imagine you have 1,000 times. Imagine you're a billionaire. I mean, what do you like? It changes the brain. We like to think that we're a certain person, but when we get more and more money, we lose more and more sense of community. Most of us. I mean, Bloomberg is just saying he's funding the like the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Agreement, but Bloomberg said he's going to cover the money and pay that to the UN.
Bill Gates is chiming in as well.
And Bill Gates. So there's some billionaires. There's always exceptions. I'm maybe generalizing, but the whole concept of, I mean, the problem is that, you know, you look back in history and it only ends very badly.
Yeah.
It ends very badly for these you know, billionaires eventually, because, you know, there's just not enough for, I mean, imagine in the, like I joke to people sometimes that we don't really need the IRS in the US, right, to connect taxes. People just write a check to the military, to the Defense Department.
So do we ask AI, how does the world end?
How does the world end?
What is this going to say?
I don't know, but I mean, the bright spark is not the West.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to argue. I'm not communist. I'm not a Chinese thumper. I'm not. I'm just looking at what I see, and I see China has a culture of learning, a culture of education, a culture of respect for others. For the most part, there's always exceptions. I mean, sure, they're doing terrible things in some parts of the country, and that's what we hear about. But they just built a road that's 180 kilometers or 150 kilometers long, and they didn't use, there was no human involved in building the road. It was all robotics. Like, can we do that? I don't think so. China
they just have the ability now to invest all of their money, should they choose to do so, and put it very much on the things they think will bring the greatest benefit to China. They don't say to individuals, but to China overall, although people who are part of it tend to benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I've been worried about climate for years, right? Climate's going to hammer us. It is hammering us. You know, what are we going to do about it? I mean, China's renewable energy is growing so fast. I mean, that's the bright spot in acting on climate. Like making the price of solar, you know, look at the most recent reports on solar energy, and like when you have a doubling rate of 3 years, right? The amount of electricity generated by solar is going to exceed all electricity generated by nuclear in a year. In 2 years, it'll exceed wind. In a decade, you could add up all of the other sources of electricity, and it's still, that's going to be less than the amount from solar. China's got 90% of that market. Like, it's just, and the price is driven so low that the only way fossil fuels could ever be developed is with subsidies, because it doesn't make economic
Mr. Trump
sense.
believes he can do that by put it back with subsidies.
Right. So what I would argue is that what Canada should do, if these subsidies come, we should really, I think we should, I think we need, if we want to survive as an independent country, think of our car manufacturing, for example. Like, we have so many industries. I mean, why don't we get China to cut deals with BYD and get them to manufacture a 13,000 US electric car in Ford, in Oakville with Ford, and just say to our big car companies, you need to work and convert to electric, and this is the way, because otherwise these companies are all going to go under, because the electric car has far fewer parts, it's far simpler. Economically, it's a no-brainer. I mean, what do? We put 100% taxes on because the US did, right? So anyway, I don't know. It's too complicated to figure out. I'm just talking about ideas, right? I mean, disagree.
Well, we all are, and we don't have enough of them.
my crystal ball went completely opaque last year, right? I don't know. What do I know?
3 quick comments. This whole idea about tariffs, one of the things that occurred to me is, instead of putting in tariffs, which in fact are going to be paid by Canadian consumers, we ought to drop the tariffs on Chinese EVs. That should be our first move.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it's
talk about billionaires and their potential fates. My favorite is Crassus. Look him up. And here's one to tweak your thoughts. I think that rather than the UN getting more power, I think the US is going to pull out of the UN, stop funding, and the UN is going to stop functioning. That said, Richard Vanderyak, you're back on deck, and I'm going over to Claude if you're still there, Claude Buechner.
I am. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm going to segue a little bit away, although it still has something to do with AI. You actually made a comment earlier about waking up some days more hopeful than others. And I have noticed in the last couple of months in your videos, you've actually, you sound more hopeful because you say we have to do something about taking the carbon, the CO2 out of the atmosphere. But that has been debunked repeatedly. And it's not that it's not technically possible, but it takes more energy and puts more CO2 up in the atmosphere than it takes out. And to scale up to actually do something now, as I speak, I think December's figure was 425 parts per million and trending and accelerating up. So, you know, it feels like that's not really part of your brand, but I'm interested because I suspect that your research on AI has informed you of something that we're not aware of. So where does your optimism come from that this could be done economically?
My optimism, he's sleeping on the sofa right next to me. That's Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, right? I think, yeah, I mean, we're all human. We all have emotions. You know, you do climate stuff for years, you can get very cynical, say, why do I bother? It's forget it. And then, you know, you look at the problem, you come back to the problem and you look at it from different angles. And I mean, I've talked about the three-legged bar stool where we got to slash fossil fuel emissions, got to pull carbon and methane out of the atmosphere, carbon dioxide removal, and we have to do solar radiation management with sulfur. Well, with the new, I mean, we know that the planet is extremely reactive to sulfur in the atmosphere, whether it be up in the low atmosphere. You know, the particles are killing what, 6, 7, 8 million people per year. The shipping company, the International Maritime Organization, which is part of the UN body, I believe, really tightened up restrictions in huge ways on sulfur in shipping fuels. James Hansen has talked about it, written many papers, and I think he's coming out with another paper this week. And I'd love for his next book to come out, which is called Sophie's Planet. His last book was Storms of Our Grandchildren about 10 years ago. Just ask people in Ireland if they think that book may be applicable to them, maybe, you know, with the recent storm there. But I really think you're talking about there's many different ways to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. So I think you're talking about us doing it with direct capture, and that's completely a no go. It's not going to work. It's not scalable. It's way too expensive. People talk about nature-based solutions. I'm a huge believer that if we could have a goal of restoring the biodiversity and the numbers of animals and plants in the ocean back to what it was like, say, 100 years ago, that would capture alone enormous amounts of carbon from the atmosphere ocean system. It would be back in the life in the ocean. I mean, we've got rid of over 90% of the large fish in the ocean. Think of a large whale, you know, and what it does for the carbon cycling. Every time it defecates, that sinks to the ocean floor. There's a proliferation of life in that type of ecosystem. So we have to look at ways to reduce ocean acidification is a key thing. And the only way to do that is to lower the CO2 levels in the atmosphere system. Or if we had a better way of taking it out of seawater, then that would draw CO2 out of the atmosphere. So there's a lot of work being done on that. When I was in Baku, some of my most memorable moments were in pubs with people from the Cambridge Climate Repair Center, talking about Hugh Hunt and Sean Fitzgerald, and they're actively working on some of these ways to draw down CO2, but also to look at ways to cool the planet with solar radiation management, which is like it used to be people were saying geoengineering, we can't go there. Well, I guess we should have told the IMO not to take sulfur out so quickly because they warm the planet for, I mean, the rate of warming, it used to be 0.18 degrees Celsius per decade. That was from 1970 up to about 2010. And it's 0.36 degrees Celsius per decade since 2010. And if you look at just the last 2 years, it's spiked upward even more with the tightening of the sulfur. So the planet is very sensitive to sulfur. So we could cool the planet 0.5 degree in 6 months if we wanted to do that, right? Just by putting sulfur into the stratosphere. What are the undetermined consequences? Well, we start putting it in slowly and then we find out what's going on. The problem is if we start doing something like that and the AMOC decides to shut off, then it's say, oh, you shut the AMOC off by doing this, although, that's ridiculous because this is a process underway, right? So there's all kinds of noise and scenarios and stuff. But, I'm convinced that we can, so I'm talking about nature-based solutions. I'm talking about stimulating phytoplankton blooms in the ocean to draw down huge amounts of carbon. I'm talking about, we can't continue to cut down forests, but so we have to get better ways of growing food. But I think our global population, I think, is going to peak sooner than people think, because these climate disruptions are getting worse and worse, and fertility rates are dropping, and people are saying, do I want to have kids? It's too expensive, can't afford it, or what kind of a world do we bring them into? There's a lot of things that are kind of self-correcting with human behavior, I think. So anyway, I have to stay somewhat hopeful in order to function. So I try to compartmentalize. I try to work on other. I mean, with me, like if I'm really, really stressed out, then I play chess for a few hours on my phone. And then when I get tired of chess on my phone, and I'm playing 3-0. So in other words, I get 3 minutes for the entire game. My opponent gets 3 minutes. So then I start cursing the internet connection, because if it's slow, there's too much latency. And then I'm at a big, huge disadvantage if my opponent's a young kid in India who has like ultra fast internet, because then his lag time is much lower. It's not to do with level. So then I get frustrated and I'll play bridge for an hour. Duplicate bridge on my phone, and then I go back to my work, right? Like I just, and also some days, just say, okay, I don't want to do any climate stuff for a couple of days. I'll do some of those things that my wife's been saying to do around the house for like a year that haven't got done. And then you start doing stuff, as soon as you start doing something actively, then your mind, it sort of carries your mind away from it. I have kids. They keep me busy. I mean, they're older now. I've got a 20, 22, 24-year-old boys, and they're all starting their careers and stuff like that. So, I've got the dog, I've got the cats. I do love going to coffee shops and chatting with people. As I used to be a bit of an introvert, if you can believe that. In high school, I was just, very studious studying and stayed away from the girls for the most part. And it's funny because I just interviewed a guy from high school who's an engineer. He started several companies. His expertise is concrete. So I had him on a group called Facing Future. I invited him, and we talked to him about, he's got over 10 patents on ways to, his company is Footprint Engineering. So the idea, how do you reduce the carbon footprint of concrete, right? The most consumed product in the world is water. The second one is concrete. So they have the big thing with concrete is durability. Like the Romans, the Parthenon, some of the structures, the wharves, the aqueducts, that's concrete that was poured 5,000 years ago. Right now, I mean, how long does a concrete, like a barrier on the highway last? Well, maybe 20, 30 years because of all the salt and corrosion. We put rebar in concrete. Romans never did that. Their secret to concrete was volcanic ash, and they mixed it with seawater. and they used some other processes. We don't know for sure, but it was self-healing. So if cracks developed, they would close up by themselves because there was crystallization of some of the minerals inside the concrete, which caused a slight expansion, which caused internal stress, which would close the cracks. So the best concrete now is maybe 50 to 100 years, depending on usage. But I mean, that seems to be the issue that's most important for low footprint of concrete. And the problem too is if you build a city all at once, then in 50 years the whole city's crumbling.
Okay, Paul, I
Right?
need to stop you there. I got a couple.
Can I just make a follow-up? Peter Carter said there's no indications that these climate change indicators will not be climate disaster catastrophe indicators. So what you've actually described is very aspirational, but I don't hear the evidence, either AI collected or not, that that we are going to be able to pull down the CO2 that is increasing actually in speed as it collects more and more excess heat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
am I
we're on a
wrong here,
runaway.
or
Yeah. No, we're on a runaway train at the moment. Like absolutely.
One which Gwynne Dyer, by the way, in Climate Wars, he thought it would probably lead to a nuclear confrontation, but that's a whole other issue.
thank you so much. I'm done.
I'd like to put
Yes.
Charlie in front of Peter for one or two quick comments. And Richard Vanderjagt, you had a number of issues you wanted to bring forth. Perhaps you could limit it to which one is the most
Yeah,
important.
I would say just one question. Is Moore's law now obsolete?
Moore's law, it kind of, I think it slowed down. Like it was always a doubling every few years, right? Of the number of
18 months.
18 months. So basically every 18 months, you could build a computer chip with twice as many transistors. And then another 18 months to another doubling and doubling. And this continued for so many years. I don't know what the very latest is on that. Why doesn't somebody just go on perplexity.ai and just ask it right now, is Moore's law still operating? And then they can come and answer that question. Because I'd be kind of, I suspect not. I don't think it's still applicable. I think more, there'll be a couple of years where it's kind of stable, and then there'll be a big leap up maybe with an AI coming up with something. I mean, AI is being used to find new materials that act in new ways, right? Can it be applied to making a faster CPU? I don't know. Like what if you got an AI and said, okay, design yourself so that your capabilities are double, right? Tell us what to do to make you double, twice as good in computation and human-like behavior, right? Eventually, and this gets into the idea of self-replication and so on. But like I said, I mean, I think, there's 3 times more people graduating in China with engineering degrees than in the West, in the US. And there's double in most science fields. And, every field of education, there's more and more people. So I would say, if we're going to get out of this as a planet, I think, we all have to become more like China. We have to value education and not the instant gratification from screens and so on that people see. So Art, did you look it up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
what I
Peter
just
McKinnon-
posted.
Peter McKinnon has answered that Moore's law is still in play. New materials.
Okay, it's still in place. Yeah.
Okay, Richard, is that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, I would leave it at that.
Okay, fine. Charlie Hall, if you're there, I'd like to get you in, and Peter McKinnon, you're on deck.
I'm here, but I didn't ask a question.
Oh, you made a whole bunch of
Made
observations.
a bunch of comments, yeah.
Well, I tried to ask you if you wanted in. If you want to back out, I'll go to.
I don't know. I just, you're a little optimistic. Well, first of all, I want to say as a professor, or an ex-professor, sure glad I'm not teaching now because I should, I spent so much blue ink in my lifetime correcting student answers and essays and whatever. And to think that I might be correcting some stupid computer, I just
Yeah.
horrifies me. And
Mm.
so my hat's off to those people who are teaching now. The second thing is, yeah, our use of electricity and so forth has been increasing for sure, but we're still burning more fossil fuel a little bit more every year than the year before. So we're just adding to the total energy we're using, and hence our total ability to disrupt the rest of nature, I suppose. And versus displacing fossil fuel. And I'm not seeing a way out of this so far.
Well, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's possible that this year is China's peak emissions ever, and then it drops every year from here on in. I mean, it's possible. About half of the
fair. I'm an ecologist, first of all, a systems ecologist, and I'm more worried, believe it or not, about running out of high grade oil and gas than I am about the climate change. Not meaning that I dispute the climate change, which I'm not sure is due to CO2. That's a whole nother story. But
ask the AI. It'll tell you. It's pretty sure it's due to CO2.
Well, of course, a lot of people are pretty sure, but
yeah, I mean,
let
we
me
know.
ask you a question, Paul. Let me ask you a question. What's the most important greenhouse gas?
Water, I guess. That's that's the answer that you're looking for, I know. I mean, water, it changes depending on temperature and everything else, but it's powerful. Actually, CFCs are
5 times more powerful than CO2.
Yeah, but SF6 is way more powerful. It's like 40,000 times more powerful. So just hope that
per molecule, per molecule.
Yeah, no, per molecule. It's trace.
Oh, I'm talking about total impact.
Yeah. Yeah, total impact. Yeah, okay. Well, most
Why is 5
powerful in
times
terms,
more
yeah, okay.
than CO2.
Okay,
Who
because of
talks
the
about
quantity in the atmosphere. It can vary for up to 100% humidity, right? All that water vapor. Believe it or not, I'm on another Zoom call, and the topic is resilience. And it's with the group Climate Emergency Forum. And Peter Carter is going to be joining me there. So I got to get him off this call so he can go on the other one. And we have a channel and we put out videos every week or so.
Okay. So in knowing that, I'm going to cut it off. Peter, sorry, if you need an answer to your questions, perhaps you can be in touch with Paul or through me by email.
It wasn't a question, it was a comment, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. But you can make it via email if you want. So Ted Manning, are you there and able to give our speaker a thank you?
I can't. Okay, are you going to let me in?
Let's see here.
We can hear you, Ted.
Somebody shut me off.
Yeah.
Now I'm muted.
No, you're not muted. We can hear you.
Okay, but the host has stopped my video.
Right, and I can't stop it. So
well, I can talk to you anyway.
Start it. So just go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'll simply say that this, as usual, is lots of fun, and we really learn something every time. We sometimes even come up with solutions. Okay, somebody says I can come on now. I do exist. Okay. Actually, it's very handy. You can eradicate any opinions you're not interested in just by blinking them off. And that's one of the other issues associated with human use of new systems. But Paul, thank you very much for bringing some very good perspectives on this. We will definitely be coming back to talk again at some point. And should you wish to talk to us again, it looks like things are changing so quickly. We need to talk to you every year, at least, if not every few months, because it is very clear. It's very clear that everybody is seriously interested in managing their interface with AI. seeing whether or not it can in fact be aimed or constrained. And but all I'll say is we may find out, unfortunately, or
Yeah,
fortunately.
well, we're all a work in progress, right?
Yes, quite
As
so.
as is our society.
That is correct. So I would like to thank you very much. Once again, when we get a very good speaker, we get very good questions, and it's usually exceptionally interesting for us all. So thank you again. So I would just ask everyone to please join our club, pay your dues. We are now asking everyone who is with us regularly to pay their dues, because that's what pays for this. That's what keeps our computers running. Maybe even keep our people who are helping us. We have people dealing with graphics and things for us. We do need to reward them from time to time. So thank you very much. And I would now say we have another one on next week. This was our 230th, and we expect to continue fairly frequently every week. So thank you all again. And if you do wish to share it with anyone, it will be on YouTube. And please sign in on YouTube. Like us. Tell us you would like us to keep doing it. So thank you very much.